He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Just a quick warning, this podcast contains descriptions of violence some listeners might find confronting. I want you to imagine for a moment you're locked up with some of New Zealand's toughest crims. You just want to keep your head down and do your lag. Then, in front of your eyes, a man is killed. You know the rules. No narking. But you decide to speak out, knowing it could put your own life in jeopardy. It must be one of the loneliest places to be, yet that's where Ernie found himself in early 1985.
Until all this damn thing is over, I'll never, I think, be able to sleep with ease.
You're listening to Nark, an RNZ investigative podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wesley-Smith. This is episode 7, Operation Icing. While detectives prepared their prosecution of Ross Appelgren for murder, Ernie cooled his heels down in New Plymouth Prison, where he'd been moved for his own safety.
Whilst this was more relaxed, still I was under suspicion as to why I was there. I evaded that issue in one way or another and cemented home the fact that why I had been sent to here because of the overcrowding at Mount Eden.
Ernie was becoming increasingly nervous. On his mind was having to testify and reveal his identity to Ross Appelgren for the first time. That would come at Ross's deposition hearing scheduled for the 8th of May 1985. We don't have them anymore, but depositions were held so a judge could determine if there was enough evidence to put an accused on trial. As the date approached, Ernie dispatched more letters to Jenkinson and other detectives, complaining about, well, a lot of things. There was his present living conditions in prison.
I'm not prepared to lose my hair, not eat, for an incompetent justice system. I will not return to New Plymouth or any other justice prison.
The ongoing police investigation.
I think I should come to Auckland and do your people's job. What the hell is wrong with you all? I've had enough of it all. I am not some hunk of shit that can be tossed about.
But most of all, Ernie demanded police commit to relocating him overseas and his early release from prison. Now, Ernie's direct involvement in these negotiations would become really important at Ross's later retrial. That's because Ernie would claim, under oath, his lawyers did all the deal-making and that he knew very little about it. Well, listen to what Ernie wrote to police himself.
I want $5,000 in country of origin, which isn't unreasonable, and a free passport, driver's license, no convictions attached, a work visa, air ticket too. I would of course welcome any shorter time in prison. I don't want to be let down.
And when Ernie thought police were stalling, he issued an ultimatum.
So my conclusion and intention now is to not give evidence at all.
As his relationship with law enforcement reached breaking point, Ernie did something quite dramatic. He switched lawyers. According to Ernie, police didn't like his current solicitor, so he got a new one. His name was Roger Chambers.
He and Jenkinson were great mates.
The other cops working the case were relieved. Detective Neil Morris called Chambers a good man, a good policeman.
Now, Roger's a friend of mine. He's a lovely guy. And some people refer to him as Constable Chambers.
That's former Auckland cop Tony Boshier, who we met in the last episode. He was involved in Ernie's arrest on his many fraud charges in 1984. Tony also knows Roger Chambers very well.
His relationship with the police was really important to him. And that was the reason why he often received the brief for secret witnesses and relocations and that sort of thing and negotiated on their behalf.
At this point, I want to properly introduce you to former journalist Keith Davies.
I'm from Wales, but I started in journalism in the UK and in England, working for evening newspapers, and ended up working at the BBC.
He eventually moved to New Zealand, where he extensively covered the Ross Appelgren case for TV3 and Metro magazine. You've heard some of his reporting already in this podcast. Keith revealed Ernie's deal-making with police in an exposé for Metro in 1996 and interviewed most of the main players, including Roger Chambers.
Well, when I was speaking to Chambers and interviewing him, it became clear that By his own account, as he would put it, he's a cop's lawyer.
This is Keith reading what Chambers told him.
When they ask for a lawyer, he said, the police are not supposed to say anything, but they do. They lean over and whisper in an ear, and they would whisper my name. My wife will tell you, he said, that there was a time when I had pink gins lined up on the Auckland police bar from detectives wanting to talk to me. I knew Peter Jenkinson personally. I make no bones about that. I do a lot of witness protection work.
Chambers recalled for Keith how Ernie was when he first met him.
An exceptionally frightened man and a great strain who needed to be convinced the police would keep their word. He wanted things in place.
Chambers' arrival broke Ernie's impasse with police. On the 3rd of May 1985, just 4 days before the depositions hearing, Assistant Police Commissioner Ken Sykes wrote to Chambers confirming police would keep their side of the bargain.
At the conclusion of the High Court trial for Ross Appelgren, and upon release from prison, the police will undertake or assist counsel acting for Ernie to change his name by deed poll, relocate Ernie in one of the following countries: the United States of America, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia or Fiji, pay for plane fares to that country and pay to Ernie the sum of $5,000 in the currency of the country in which Ernie is to be relocated. This being an amount which will compensate for expenses in re-establishing himself in that country.
With that, things were back on track. At Ross's deposition hearing, Ernie gave a graphic account of witnessing Darcy's murder and the incriminating comments Ross made to him afterwards. Interestingly, Ross's lawyer asked Ernie if he had ever been suspected of involvement in the murder. Seeming to forget Jenkinson had said something very similar to him at their very first meeting, Ernie simply replied,
Hardly.
Ernie's damning testimony helped convince the court Ross should go on trial in July 1985. It had been a full-on 5 months for Ernie, from the murder in January to hammering out a deal with police between February and May, before finally becoming the Crown's star witness. After depositions, Ernie was moved to the cells at Takapuna Police Station to wait out the 2 months until Ross's trial, which was set to begin in July. But it was no Hilton. Again, as was his custom, Ernie made his displeasure known to police in writing.
The first 2 weeks were absolutely disgusting. It's like living in a 10 by 6 shed, shut up for 23 out of 24 hours. It was not a prison, it was torture.
By this point, Ernie was sending the cops so many letters, he signed some off simply as, guess who? Officers looking after Ernie at Takapuna tried to make his life a little more bearable. He was let out for runs along the local beach. Detective Neil Morris even took him on night patrols in his car and let him handle the police radio whenever it crackled into life. But after 5 weeks in the cells, Morris reported Ernie was going downhill. He wasn't sleeping and had lost his appetite, dropping 6 kilograms in the process. Ernie dialed up his demands. At the end of May 1985, he informed Jenkinson he wanted new lodgings and a firm promise he wouldn't go back to prison after Ross's trial.
You have to have me settled by Queen's birthday weekend. Ring these bums up and tell them so. I could have a real memory blank otherwise.
Eventually, and remarkably it has to be said, Ernie's complaints reached the highest level of police. As journalist Keith Davies would later report, on the 10th of June 1985, police sent a letter to the Justice Department. It was from the office of the Police Commissioner, Ken Thompson, and said police were concerned for Ernie's safety and mental health. So the cops proposed a creative solution. Ernie should be put up in a motel. The police said there was an allowance in the law for a prisoner like Ernie to be kept in custody outside of jail, and they suggested police and prison staff could guard Ernie around the clock in a witness protection operation. Here's Keith, reading from the letter.
It is the view of my senior CIB officers in Auckland that the prosecution case against Appelgren could certainly fail without Ernie's evidence.
And the letter went on to rather pointedly state that the Justice Department would no doubt be concerned that there'd been a homicide in one of their penal institutions and that convicting the offender responsible for such an outrage would be the best deterrent. Finally, police acknowledge that since Ernie's own prison sentence didn't finish until the end of 1986, his out-of-jail stay must only be seen as short-term.
Interestingly, both he and his lawyer had been instructed his future would only be decided after the trial against Appelgren.
The reason? Well, according to the letter in Thompson's name, neither police nor the Justice Department could be seen to hold out any promise to induce or encourage Ernie to give evidence. Of course, if this was a concern, how did that square with the fact Assistant Commissioner Ken Sykes had already reached an agreement with Ernie's lawyer just 5 weeks earlier? Despite all that, on paper at least, Ernie met the criteria required to get on the witness protection program. That's according to Lance Boudet, who used to protect witnesses like Ernie.
There's a determination on that. The evidence must be valuable, critical to the investigation.
Well, police said Ernie was the only eyewitness to Darcy Tahira's murder, so that box is ticked.
It must be for something that is extremely valuable. We're talking murder investigations here.
Another tick?
There must be a threat. That's another part of the criteria.
Also, a tick. Police said Ernie had been threatened and his cooperation with police had become known to other inmates since his appearance at depositions. So it wasn't a surprise when the Justice Department signed off on the police proposal. Now there's some important context for the assessments being made about Ernie's safety in prison. While this was playing out in 1985, a government bill called the Criminal Justice Bill was making its way through Parliament. It proposed many changes, including giving the Justice Minister the power to grant early release of inmates when their safety behind bars couldn't be guaranteed. This included informants like Ernie. It got a lot of pushback from the Public Service Union representing prison officers. In their submission to the Select Committee, they wrote,
"Given adequate staff and resources, there is no offender who cannot be protected from serious assault. Segregation of prisoners is commonplace."
The union pointed out that at that time, there were 139 inmates under protection in just 3 prisons, including Mount Eden. National, the opposition party, also rejected the idea. MP Paul East told the media he believed it was unnecessary and dangerous, and interestingly, could be used as a reward for prisoners who might have information about criminals at large. In the end, the government relented. That part of the bill was scrapped in July 1985. So given all that, was the risk posed to Ernie perhaps overstated even a little by police? Firstly, the other Crown witness, the inmate Gordon, who'd taken the same risk as Ernie in speaking out, never got released to a motel. And I think it's fair to question, if the Justice Department thought it could keep 139 other at-risk inmates safe, then couldn't it have done the same thing for Ernie? By mid-June 1985, Ernie was in much more comfortable surroundings, a motel in Christchurch.
It was then upon arriving in Christchurch that things became more civilised and humane.
But the impact of the previous months had taken its toll on Ernie. Coming off the plane in Christchurch, he was described by police as thin, tired and wound up. But now Ernie was in for some genuine R&R. His motel was in a suburb on the outskirts of Christchurch. As one police report said, it's in a rural setting with access to large open grass areas. All to himself, Ernie had a large bedroom, separate lounge, kitchen, shower and bathroom. The shelves were kept well stocked and he had access to some of the best technology around in 1985. Colour TV, video player, radio and a telephone. Not bad for $50 a night, paid for of course by the taxpayer. And police certainly couldn't be accused of being inattentive to Ernie's needs, moving him to a new room because he wasn't getting enough sun in the old one. Booze was off the cards, but under guard, Ernie was allowed to see his family and girlfriend, go for walks, and eat out at restaurants. He even got to go on trips to places like Akaroa, Borders Pass, and Hanna Springs. And remember, this was all while he was meant to be doing hard time, serving a prison sentence for more than 200 counts of fraud. Not surprisingly, Ernie was soon looking like a new man. He'd come a long way from his cell in the Mount Eden kitchen block. That all said, back in 1985, Ernie wasn't sent to Christchurch for a holiday. He was a star witness in a prison murder trial at the centre of the top-secret witness protection operation mounted by the police and the Justice Department. At the time, it would become the most expensive undertaking of its kind in New Zealand history. It even had a name, which is kind of cool actually, Operation Icing. Day one of Operation Icing was 18th of June 1985, just over a month away from the trial. 5 police and 5 prison officers worked 8-hour shifts in teams of 2 to keep Ernie safe. They were under strict orders to never let him out of their sight. So hush-hush was everything. The guards weren't even allowed to know Ernie's real identity or role as a witness. So he was flown south using a false name. Operation Icing was run with military-like planning and precision. Police kept a daily and detailed diary of Ernie's every movement and every meeting. Those reports, which I have, were sent on to Jenkinson and Police National Headquarters. And some of the detail has never before seen the light of day. Until now. Much of what was recorded was mundane, but some things just leapt right off the page. Apparently unsatisfied with the answers he was getting from police about his post-trial future, Ernie wrote a letter of complaint to the Justice Minister, Geoffrey Palmer. I don't have a copy of Ernie's letter or Palmer's reply, but I have those daily police records of what resulted, and it's pretty striking. On the 24th of June 1985, according to the police reports, just a week after Ernie had moved into his motel, Palmer sent Charles Hood, the superintendent at Christchurch's Papirua prison, to have a personal meeting with Ernie. Ross's trial was less than 4 weeks away. A cop that was present made a written record of the meeting between Ernie and Hood. Here's journalist Keith Davies reading from it. And just a note, Ernie was referred to only as the subject.
The record of that meeting states Mr. Hood indicated that the Minister of Justice had instructed him to reassure the subject that he would be well looked after he had given his evidence and that he would not be put in any prison of any kind after the trial. Mr. Hood told the subject that the Minister was looking favourably at a pardon after the trial, and while the Minister was not in a position at the present time to guarantee anything, the subject would not simply be dumped and forgotten. The policeman who witnessed this conversation noted Ernie was not impressed by the thought of a pardon, and he thought the news media might blow it out of all proportion.
Ernie even wondered if it would be better if he just finished his sentence and, quote, paid his debt to society. What Ernie really wanted, though, was not to go back inside, to serve out his time somewhere away from prison. So the next day, Ernie rang Hood to say he'd had a change of heart. He'd accept the offer of a pardon after all, which in effect was just early release. He'd roll along with any bad publicity. Hood communicated all of this back to Justice Department head office in Wellington. But justice officials then reversed course. Further police records show that 10 days later, on the 3rd of July 1985, Hood traipsed back out to the motel. But his news wasn't what Ernie wanted to hear. Hood said he'd had more information from the minister. Head office had decided there could be no promises given, not even the assurance already made, that Ernie wouldn't be returned to prison after the trial. The reason, well, as far as I can tell, officials got nervous that such promises could be construed as an inducement for Ernie to give evidence and thereby jeopardise his trial testimony. This sent Ernie around the bend. According to the police report, Ernie was angry and distraught. He said he refused to give evidence until he received an assurance he would not be placed back in prison after the trial. When Peter Jenkinson, the lead detective on the murder investigation, found out about what Hood told Ernie, he was brassed off as well. Jenkinson said as far as police were concerned, Hood had it wrong. Ernie being told he wouldn't go back to jail wasn't an inducement because it was done for Ernie's safety. The police notes record Jenkinson as saying Hood was talking nonsense. So as of July 3rd, just 3 weeks before the trial, it looks as though the Justice Department and the police had different views of this key question we keep coming back to. Was a promise to keep Ernie out of prison after the trial an inducement or just plain common sense? The tension between justice and police didn't last long. A report dated the 11th of July by a senior Christchurch officer dismisses Hood's second meeting with Ernie as causing unnecessary distress because police had no intention of Ernie returning to prison. End of. It seems Jenkinson had intervened and sorted it. Ernie finally had the guarantee he was after. He could chill. He wouldn't again be bunking down in a cell after all, even though he still had at least a year to serve on his prison sentence. He was now all set for Ross's trial. To be honest, when I read about the meetings between Ernie and Mr. Hood, I was astonished. In my years working in and reporting on the justice system, I'd never heard of anything like this happening before. The mystery then deepened when I came across a letter Palmer had sent Ernie's lawyer, Roger Chambers, in October 1986. In it, Palmer said his advice from his Secretary of Justice was, and I quote, "Department of Justice officials were at no stage involved in any discussions about the future relocation and protection of Ernie, nor were any promises made to him about future reward or assistance." Wait a second. Play the tape again.
Mr. Hood indicated that the Minister of Justice had instructed him to reassure the subject that he would be well looked after he had given his
Okay,
evidence.
obviously both these things can't be true. Sure, the Department of Justice had changed its mind and withdrawn the offer. But after police intervened, Ernie had got the early release he wanted. It's all there in multiple police reports. Hood visited Ernie twice, the Justice Department had considered Ernie's appeals, and according to the police documents, the Minister himself had given instructions. I can't ask Hood about it all, he died in 2021. So to clear this all up, we decided to contact Geoffrey Palmer, or Sir Geoffrey as he's now known. Sir Geoffrey is an honorary fellow at the Victoria University Law School in Wellington. He's had a long and distinguished career in New Zealand law and politics. He was our 33rd Prime Minister and has been a leading legal scholar for decades. When it comes to trying to get an interview with a person like Sir Geoffrey, it helps to have someone who knows them.
Here we go. Okay, we are there.
That's my executive producer, Tim Watkin. Fortunately for me, he's previously interviewed Sir Geoffrey and was able to convince him to come on the podcast.
So, let's just start very generally. What do you remember the case?
I do not. I have no recollection of anything relating to it. It's 40 years ago.
This is one of the obvious challenges with doing a podcast like this. We are always asking a lot of people to remember back that far. Sir Geoffrey has another understandable difficulty. As Justice Minister in 1985, he had a lot on his plate and lots of officials buzzing about doing things on his behalf.
Now, and you have to understand that ministers act on advice. There are lots of officials who are doing work on this, and they assure the minister, and the minister signs things out. I'm sure that I gave attention to it properly at the time, but I just don't have any recollection of it. The number of things the Minister of Justice did in those days, the Justice Department was much, much bigger then than it is now.
To assist Sir Geoffrey's recollection, we sent him all the police reports that described Charles Hood's meetings with Ernie.
I have no recollection of ever having any conversation with Mr. Hood. He wasn't one of my top officials.
No, he was superintendent at the prison at Paparua.
Yes, well, really, I can't take responsibility for anything he says.
Well, he says that he was acting on your behalf and that the minister had told him to assure you that you would be looked after. And the question is obviously one of inducement, whether this man was then doing well.
Said it's a very bad thing to say. I agree with that, but I have no memory of giving such assurance or giving him any authority to say that. I'm astonished that this Mr. Hood was saying things. I have no recollection of ever seeing a Mr. Hood.
Sir Geoffrey was also rather surprised to learn about other aspects of Ernie's treatment, including that he was put up in a motel and then rental accommodation for more than 18 months, from June 1985 to early February 1987.
Oh my God!
It does go on. He stayed in this motel on the public dime for a year and never went back to prison, and basically had an early parole and could wander around the streets and do what he liked when he was supposedly still serving a sentence for fraud.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound satisfactory in any way. But
Then a year later, there's a letter from you, signed by you, saying the Ministry of Justice and myself had no involvement in this case at all, when there's evidence there was involvement. And so that seems to be contradictory.
Well, my reflection is that it is quite possible there was an injustice done here. How it was done and how it occurred is really pretty impossible to recollect accurately at this time.
Sir Geoffrey also told Tim that all the material relating to Ernie's dealings with police and the Justice Department should have been disclosed to Ross and his lawyers at the first trial. This is one of the grounds at the heart of Ross's appeal.
Well, that may be meritorious for all I know. This is a pretty serious matter, and I can see that it's a serious matter, and all I can say is that if an injustice occurred, it needs to be sorted out in the court now.
The former Justice Minister isn't the only one with raised eyebrows about Ernie and his dealings with police and the Department of Justice. I asked former Detective Inspector Lance Burdett if he'd ever heard of any witness being offered early release while a case was live.
Oh, hell no. Never heard that one.
Because that's what's happened here.
Whoa. I'm stumbling for words. That's flabbergasting.
Because arguably, I suppose it could put the integrity of a prosecution at risk.
Absolutely. Without a doubt, it could. Forget that. We get. You've knocked me off my feet. We've talked about money, and I've been able to dismiss that. We've talked about relocation. I've said, yeah, well, that's normal. For that, and you certainly don't say, hey, look, if you give the evidence, you're gonna, you'll be released at the earliest opportunity. That's fairy tale stuff.
It's absolutely extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it.
Tim McKinnell is equally flummoxed. He's also concerned about Ross's lawyers never being told about Ernie's encounters with Mr. Hood.
And I can't understand, why you would put the department in that position. And then, perhaps easier to understand is why you wouldn't disclose it, because of its extraordinary nature and what it might tell you about what was going on.
And Tim's view, looking back over how Ernie's relationship with police developed, is this.
There should be no doubt it was, it's incredibly difficult to investigate a homicide in a prison where the witnesses are predominantly other prisoners who have a real reluctance to talk to the police. But that doesn't justify you taking whatever steps you want to secure a conviction.
Now, given Tim is working to overturn Ross's murder conviction, it's to be expected he has a negative take on all that was set out in this episode. So let's accept, just for the moment, the Crown and Police version is correct, that Ernie did witness the murder, and that to protect him, the money, the relocation, heck, even the overtures from the Justice Minister were all justified. But what explains the failure to document, as protocol required, those crucial first steps of the inquiry? Such as how Ernie was identified as an eyewitness, why he was originally considered a suspect, and what was it that he discussed with Jenkinson during their first encounter. Because if Ross Appelgren is the killer, then the lack of this paper trail puts his conviction at risk. His lawyers can say police promised to reward Ernie solely in return for a story that fit their narrative. And the problems with the lack of documentation would only increase. Because in the next episode, we will return to Ross and the path he took to the courtroom for a trial that never heard what you just have.
I'd never seen anything like it. He was rolling around on the ground, screaming that he couldn't go on. They took him away.
The difficulty you have is deciding where the truth lies when you have people of bad character telling you different stories.
I was of the view that one of those particular witnesses was in fact, if not the perpetrator of the crime, was certainly very, very involved.
And we'll find out exactly what the top cop at the time knew about it all.
I didn't know anything about it. You told me.
Coming up on the next episode of Nark. Thanks for listening to Nark, hosted and written by me, Mike Wesley Smith. I'm also extremely grateful to everyone who spoke with me for this podcast, especially Suzanne Young and Julia Appelgren. And if anyone listening has more information about this case, I'd be keen to hear from you. Send an email to nark@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Nark wherever you get your podcasts, and if you've enjoyed it, use the share button to recommend it to a friend. Some more quick thank yous to Ngā Taonga and Mediaworks for some of the archival audio, and to the voice actors who helped bring some of the characters in this episode to life. Justine Murray, Nigel Collins, Craig Genty, Duncan Smith, and Corey Fuimaono. The RNZ producers who worked on this episode were Liz Garton, William Ray, Duncan Smith, and Justin Gregory. The audio engineer was William Saunders. Thanks also to Steve Burridge and Jeremy Ansell for the studio wrangling, and to Kevin Golding for opening the doors to me every week after hours. Graphics were designed by Amrita Marks, and the shorthand page, where you can find more information on this story, was made by Hing-Yi Kong. Check it out at rnz.co.nz/nark. Tim Watkin is RNZ's Executive Editor Audio, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the Production Coordinator. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts like Context on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Check them out. Bye for now.